There's a kind of silence that only exists in big cities, a silence built by noises no one else hears. The distant train, the sound of sirens that become part of the landscape, and the muffled cries of someone who learned that fighting isn't always worth it. In communities forgotten by tourist maps, time passes slower, but urgency never sleeps. In South Chicago, among brick buildings darkened by time and avenues cut by crooked poles, Malik Carter grew up. At 19, he carried the rigidity of someone who had to mature too quickly. Black, with dark skin and a deep gaze, Malik walked with the posture of someone who observed everything and spoke little. His long fingers seemed made for playing the piano, but they danced better over disassembled computer keyboards, often salvaged from the trash by himself. The first time he fixed a computer, he was 10 years old. The device was abandoned in front of a closed school in the neighborhood, covered in dust and neglect. Malik took it home as if he had found a treasure. He spent nights disassembling and reassembling the parts, as if each wire revealed a new secret of the world. It didn't take long for him to learn, on his own, how to get in where he shouldn't. The internet taught him the language of codes, and the codes taught him a new way of seeing the city, as a network full of loopholes, flaws, and doors that no one truly locked. It was hard to see innocence in that serious face and in eyes that carried more wariness than his age allowed, but there was still a disguised tenderness when he spoke to Jamal. Jamal Lewis was Malik's opposite. He had an easy smile, a wide laugh, and always seemed to find humor even in the worst situations. Thin, tall, with a somewhat sloppy style, and always wearing torn sneakers, Jamal lived as if every day was a chance to escape destiny. At 17, he had already known more funerals than birthdays, and yet he insisted on dreaming. It was he who dragged Malik out of the house, saying that being locked up with wires and screens saved no one. They complemented each other, like opposite sides of the same trauma, and no matter how much Malik pretended not to care, it was Jamal who made the world seem a little less sunken. The two's afternoons almost always ended on top of an abandoned building, where the city's wires met in vandalized power boxes. There, Malik connected his old laptop and plunged into the sea of data flowing through Chicago. It was his hiding place and his laboratory. Jamal just watched, laughing at the way his friend talked to the machine as if it responded. One of those afternoons, Malik commented that the police system used old protocols and that any child with patience could get in. Jamal scoffed, saying it was better to hack into the neighborhood diner's system and get free cheeseburgers. Malik laughed, but didn't answer. He already knew that the problem was never the difficulty of hacking. The problem was what you did after you got in. In that world of cracked concrete and broken windows, there were invisible codes, unwritten rules that separated those who survived from those who disappeared. Malik was tired of seeing the disappeared become statistics. He just didn't know yet that he would soon be forced to become more than an observer. Night fell over Chicago with the same weight as always, but that week, something would begin to break inside him, something that not even the most complex code could fix. That Friday, the air was drier than usual, as if the sky itself knew what was about to happen. Malik immediately noticed that something was wrong with the way Jamal leaned against the building's parapet, his shoulders hunched, his gaze distant, his hands restless. There was no ready joke, no silly teasing about his cheap coffee addiction or the USB cables scattered in his backpack. Just an uncomfortable silence, broken by the sound of tires screeching on the street below. Jamal had changed. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, almost a whisper confessing a sin. He said that he had gotten a run for Saturday, a quick job, nothing much, just delivering a package from point A to point B. According to him, it was just driving, receiving, and leaving. They would pay $200 in cash, no questions asked, no complications. Malik didn't answer immediately. He watched his friend carefully, as if searching for hidden signs in the words. Jamal looked away, feigning interest in the distant city lights. Then Malik commented, without raising his voice, but with the precision of a blade, that no one paid $200 for something that didn't involve risk, and that in that part of the city, every delivery came with an open cemetery. Jamal tried to laugh, but there was no sound. He argued that he had no choice. His mother was sick, medicines were expensive, and odd jobs in construction had dried up. The system was quick to collect bills, but slow to offer alternatives. He said he didn't want to become a criminal, and that he was tired of feeling useless. It was at that moment that you saw who Jamal was inside. Behind the easy laugh was an exhausted boy, crushed by a world that had taught him to give up. He didn't want to be a criminal. He just didn't want to see his mother coughing blood and pretending everything was fine. Malik felt a deep anger grow in silence, not against Jamal, but against the city, the politicians, the smiling faces on television who pretended to care. Jamal was just another one pushed into the abyss, a number waiting to become a statistic. He tried to dissuade him, said there were other ways out, that he could teach Jamal about technology, earn some honest money, even if it was slow. But Jamal had already decided, and that night as he walked away down the rusty stairs, he said it would only be once, just one run. After that, he would stop. It was a lie, and they both knew it. Malik woke up the next morning with a feeling in his stomach he couldn't name. He checked the networks, scanned the police channels he used to monitor, and saw a 1050 code broadcast live. Armed confrontation in North Lawndale. Suspect dead at the scene. The name came shortly after. Jamal Lewis. Malik didn't move. The screen seemed to float. The letters trembled, but not due to an internet failure. It was his hand, unable to contain the fury. The local news report said the suspect resisted, and that there were clear signs of involvement with drug trafficking. No word about the package, no mention of witnesses, just Jamal's name associated with another closed case. At the police station, the official note was signed by Detective Raymond Whitaker, a white man with a cold expression, pale eyes, and a sharp voice, known behind the scenes for cleaning up complicated neighborhoods. He was efficient, he was praised, and he was feared by everyone who knew what truly hid behind the badge. Malik knew right then that Whitaker didn't kill criminals. He manufactured criminals to justify deaths. At the funeral, Jamal's mother remained silent. Sitting in a borrowed chair with dry eyes and interlocked hands, she seemed to have buried not only her son, but her own body along with him. Alyssa was beside her, holding a small black umbrella that trembled against the wind. She had tears in her eyes, but hatred in her heart. Malik didn't speak to anyone. He just observed. He analyzed everything, from the polished shoes of the police officer in a suit to the feigned, sad look of a local politician who showed up to offer solidarity. That night, back at the abandoned building, Malik looked at his old laptop as if facing a weapon. The code was no longer just a refuge. Now it was ammunition. He didn't know Charles Ellison's name yet, or the depth of the web that sustained the system, but something inside him had finally broken, and the boy who once only observed was now preparing to attack. Nights began to blend. Time ceased to be marked by clocks and began to be measured by lit screens, lines of code, and corrupted files that came to life under his fingers. Malik stopped counting the days. He spent hours with broken headphones, listening to the white noise of police radios, old recordings, encrypted traffic. The pain needed sound to silence itself. The room where he slept became a trench. The walls were covered with network maps, urban traffic diagrams, information flows. Each point, each line, each wire represented a possible route, a chance to enter where he wasn't welcome. The city was a disorganized machine, full of vulnerabilities that no one cared to fix. Malik understood that better than anyone. He knew where the system bled. Anger had given way to precision, sadness to focus. He started small. First, he tracked security cameras around the location where Jamal had been killed. He discovered that, due to technical problems, the videos from the night in question had been deleted minutes before the police team arrived. It was too much of a coincidence to be real. Next, he accessed the local police database. He found forged reports, repeated findings, phantom witnesses, all with the signature of Detective Raymond Whitaker, the same man who appeared in photos smiling alongside politicians, receiving medals, shaking hands with businessmen, always with that expressionless look of someone who followed orders without ever getting his hands dirty. The first time he hacked into a government server, Malik felt fear. The black screen blinking, the numbers moving, the access granted signal. It was like crossing an invisible line. But he soon realized that no one was watching. The system, despite appearing inviolable from the outside, was rotten inside, like the men who commanded it. It was at that moment that he gave himself a name, a pseudonym, a symbol, a digital signature that he would engrave like a scar on the city's corrupted data. The Ghost. Not because he wanted to be invisible, but because they had already made him a ghost. A face the system ignored, a life that didn't matter until it became a problem. And now he was. He began to leak small pieces of information, a list of names of police officers involved in extrajudicial executions. Then, suspicious bank statements of businessmen with political connections. Each leak was accompanied by a small, simple, and direct message. The system knows, but pretends not to see. I see. On the deep web, forums began to comment on this ghost. Some thought it was an invention. Others said it was a group of disgruntled former employees. But Malik was always one step ahead. He wasn't seeking fame. He didn't want followers. He wanted justice, even if he had to break every bone in the structure to achieve it. It was in this process that he crossed paths with Alyssa Bennett again. She appeared on top of the building where he used to go, with her backpack on her shoulders and a serious expression. She brought printouts of leaked documents. She wanted to understand if it was real. She said she knew it was him, even without proof, that she recognized his style, his silence. Malik tried to deny it, but she interrupted with a calm firmness. If he wanted to continue, he would need more than technical skills. He would need legally solid evidence. Codes opened doors, but only well-presented truth brought down empires. Alyssa had changed. She was stronger, less idealistic, more determined. Her clear eyes carried a new weight, as if they held controlled anger. She was the daughter of a progressive teacher, raised among books and speeches about justice. But at that moment, she didn't speak like a student. She spoke like someone willing to burn bridges to save lives. They formed a silent alliance. While Malik dug deep into the systems, hacking and copying without leaving traces, Alyssa translated everything into legal language. She connected the names, organized the evidence, drew the map of a power structure that involved the police, the judiciary, and a figure who hovered above everyone, Charles "Chuck" Ellison. He appeared as a campaign donor, a foundation advisor, owner of construction companies that won public contracts with inflated values, a white man with silver hair and a bank commercial smile, educated, articulate, charismatic, and lethal. Malik felt his blood boil every time he saw his face in speeches about urban renewal or safety for all. Chuck spoke tenderly about the city's future while funding police operations that killed boys like Jamal. For him, young black men were disposable variables, part of the cost of keeping the gears turning. This was the monster, and Malik now had a new goal: expose, bring down, destroy. But the system was waking up, and it didn't like ghosts. The warning came as a whisper among noises, a simple notification, white background and black text, interrupting the sequence of codes as if asking for silence at a wake. You have been located. Malik froze. The cursor blinked like a collapsing heart. For a second, the world stopped. No sound from the street penetrated the walls of the room. Neither the wind, nor the horns, nor the distant cries of Chicago's dawn. Only that warning still on the screen, like the fixed gaze of a predator that has already smelled blood. His hand hesitated over the keyboard. He tried to close the window, but the system did not respond. The folders with the files about Ellison, Whitaker, and the illegal transactions disappeared before his eyes, as if erased by invisible fingers. A virus? A trace? Malik knew it wasn't a simple attack. It was a message. It came from within. Someone who knew the paths he used. Someone with access not only to the networks, but to the system's core. Malik violently shut everything down. He removed the hard drive, destroyed it with a hammer, and ran downstairs, disappearing into the alleys with short breaths and his heart pounding against his teeth. For the first time, he felt real fear, not of what he might find, but of who was already after him. In the following days, he kept moving. He slept in different places, used disposable devices, avoided any fixed connection. His face wasn't in the news, no official bulletin, no accusation. But the hunt had begun. Silent, surgical, invisible, like him. Alyssa tried to contact him for 3 days before Malik finally found her. She was worried. She had noticed strange movements, too. A university colleague had been visited by the prosecution, asking about his involvement with digital activists. One of the foundations where she interned had been raided by alleged IRS inspectors. Nothing was direct, but everything was a threat. Malik told her about the warning, about the loss of the files, about the certainty that too many eyes were now following him. It was then that she suggested the name he had been avoiding for weeks. Charles Ellison. An untouchable public figure. Former state senator, current CEO of Ellison Group, a conglomerate of civil construction, private security, and sustainable urban development. He was the one who financed the campaigns that elected prosecutors, police chiefs, judges, and councilmen. He was the one who appeared alongside the mayor at charity events. He was the one who embraced decorated police officers for reducing crime rates in neighborhoods where black youth disappeared. For him, black young men were disposable variables, part of the cost of keeping the gears turning. This was the monster. And Malik now had a new goal. Expose, bring down, destroy. But the siege was tightening. Alyssa was followed twice to the library. One of her emails was blocked by the university. Malik realized that the tools he used before were no longer safe. The traces were being identified in real time. Someone from the government itself, possibly within the judiciary, was actively operating against him. It was then that he decided to use the last resort. An external server, hidden outside the country, powered by an anonymous network of journalists and activists. It was his only chance to publish everything, unfiltered, unedited, with no chance to be erased. But for that, he would need something irrefutable, a video, an audio, something that directly linked Charles Ellison to the executions, to the trafficking, to the manipulations of the prosecution. And he knew where to find it. At the gala that would take place that Friday, where businessmen and politicians would gather to celebrate Chicago's social advances. There, among wine glasses and false applause, everyone would be, including Detective Whitaker, the man who pulled the metaphorical trigger that killed Jamal. The plan was simple: infiltrate, record, extract. But nothing in that city was simple.
The mirror did not return the same face. The reflection showed a young man in a dark suit, neatly combed hair, serious expression. But behind the tight tie and borrowed jacket, it was still Malik, the boy from the South Side, the son of the neighborhood where sirens were a soundtrack and silence was a sign of death. Alyssa watched him from a distance. She had helped with the disguise, printed a fake badge with the name of a city council intern, and forged the guest list for the charity gala organized by the Ellison Group. Everything had been carefully calculated, and yet, the moment they crossed the entrance of the glass-enclosed hall, Malik felt the world become a minefield. Classical music filled the environment with a false lightness. Violinists played while waiters circulated with trays of champagne. Golden curtains hid armored windows. The chandelier's glow reflected in the forced smiles of businessmen, overly made-up wives, politicians on an early campaign. It was there, in the center of that theater of cynicism, that he saw him again, Charles Ellison. Up close, he was even more repulsive. He wore an impeccable pearly white suit, a rehearsed smile on his thin lips, a voice soft as moldy silk. He talked to a state senator, laughing at a joke that didn't seem funny. In his gaze, there was the calm of someone who had never been punished for anything, a predator in diplomat skin. Further on, Detective Whitaker appeared. He wore civilian clothes, but it was impossible to mistake him. Broad shoulders, steel gaze, clenched jaw. He greeted everyone with mechanical nods, like an efficient employee who fulfills his social cleansing duties. He was respected there, revered as a watchdog for an elite that feared losing control. Malik moved like a shadow. He avoided direct contact, moved along the edges, listened to fragments of conversations. It was in a side corridor, near the service stairs, that he heard what he needed. Whitaker was talking to an older fat man with a sweaty mustache and fingers covered in rings. They were alone, laughing softly, like accomplices to a dirty secret. The detective commented that the shipment from the West was already under control, and that the boys would be labeled as an active threat before the operation. He used the expression perishable goods. He said that the more mess in the record, the easier it was to justify a shot. The other laughed loudly. Malik recorded everything. There were no full names, but the cynicism was clear. And the tone used, the naturalness with which they spoke of the death of black teenagers as if they were expired tomato boxes. Later, in the main hall, Charles Ellison took the stage. The crowd fell silent. He spoke about progress, urban revitalization, combating crime. He talked about his commitment to youth, mentioning scholarships, partnerships with NGOs, opportunities to get young people off the streets. Malik watched. His hand holding the cell phone almost trembled. Ellison's coldness was hypnotic and deadly. He used words as weapons. He called the dead statistics. He offered donations to public schools while profiting from contracts that kept them in ruins. He used trafficking as currency. He bought judges, intimidated prosecutors, eliminated witnesses. The elite applauded him, standing. Alyssa appeared behind Malik, murmuring that it was time. He nodded. Both left the hall through the side exit. In his inner pocket, Malik carried the external hard drive with everything he had collected. In the secure cloud, he had already uploaded part of the data. But that recording, that dirty audio, was the silver bullet. Outside, the night seemed colder. Chicago, with its gleaming buildings and deep shadows, still slept, ignoring the bodies under its tracks. But Malik was no longer a spectator. He was the intruder in the system, the glitch that could not be predicted. The war was no longer digital. Now it was personal. In the early hours of Monday morning, while the city was still digesting the remains of the weekend, a file began to circulate in the darkest corners of the internet. Its name was simple, almost trivial. The System Bleeds. It was an encrypted package with 2.4 gigabytes of information, recordings, spreadsheets, falsified police records, bank transfers, illegal contracts. internal messages, blurry photos of meetings between suited men, and at the center of it all, Detective Whitaker's voice mocking deaths and Charles Ellison's name in memos linking his company to money laundering disguised as social projects. Malik didn't sign as the ghost. This time, he let the facts speak. The file was delivered to 3 independent journalists, a collective of civil rights lawyers, and an international organization that monitored corruption in fragile democracies. In less than 24 hours, the leak exploded like an out-of-control fire, and the city began to scream. In the official news, silence. Major media outlets ignored or tried to discredit the source, but on social media, in the streets, in encrypted messages from teachers, activists, indignant mothers, and tired youth, Ellison's name became a symbol of rottenness. The hashtag System Bleeds became a worldwide trending topic. Ellison was forced to appear on national television. With the same clean suit and rehearsed smile, he denied everything. He said he was a victim of data invasion, digital terrorism, conspiracy against authorities. But the tremor was already beginning to shake the foundations. Whitaker, in turn, disappeared. The police said he was on medical leave, but internal sources mentioned destruction of evidence and burning of files. In secret forums, rumors began to circulate that the detective was trying to leave the country. Others said he had been erased to protect the chain. Malik watched everything from the window of an abandoned apartment on the west side. With his eyes fixed on an old TV connected to the digital signal, he saw the faces of his enemies trying to recompose themselves. Alyssa, on the other side of the city, struggled to keep the data safe. She received anonymous threats, fake emails, calls with silence on the other end of the line, but she resisted. She knew that was just the beginning. Meanwhile, in the streets, something new emerged. Posters with Malik's image, a hooded shadow with binary code in the background, began to appear on walls, poles, and graffiti. No one knew who he was, but everyone knew what he meant. For those who had always been on top, he was a criminal. For those who had always been crushed, he was justice incarnate. And that's why the system would react with everything. The morning after the leak, a state judge issued a federal arrest warrant. Reason? Data invasion, digital terrorism, conspiracy against authorities. Malik was now public enemy number 1. The city burned in silence, and Malik knew it was only a matter of time until footsteps echoed at the wrong door. But he wouldn't run. There was still one last piece missing. The final connection, the direct line between the blood on the sidewalks and the millions in Ellison's coffers. And he already knew where to look. At the bottom of the state prosecutor's archives, where complaints disappeared, where corpses turned into cold reports. He didn't just want to expose, he wanted to ruin.
The Illinois State Prosecutor's Office building seemed impenetrable, monitored 24 hours a day by security cameras filled with detectors, servers protected by layers and layers of firewalls, a digital bunker serving dirty interests. But what the empire builders never understood was that systems are not just made of code, they are made of people, and people fail. Malik knew that. While SWAT helicopters flew over the peripheral neighborhoods under the pretext of preventive security actions, he was already infiltrated. Not physically, but within the prosecutor's internal systems, with a back door opened by an employee tired of seeing evidence disappear from the screen. The plan was simple, the execution suicidal. With Alyssa coordinating data routes and independent journalists connected in real time, Malik accessed the classified files of an acting prosecutor, Henry Mason, Charles Ellison's right-hand man, a man with a reputation as a patriot and an inflammatory speech against urban chaos. White, gel-combed hair, empty gaze like an inactive terminal. Mason was the kind of man who called summary executions acceptable statistics. In the internal emails, Malik found the final link. A message exchange between Mason and Ellison, with copies of reports on police operations in specific communities. Documents that pointed targets, instructions to plant evidence, coordinates of executions that would later be sold to the media as heroic actions. In one of the messages, Ellison writes, "The next batch needs more impact. Reinforce the self-defense narrative. I need this by the next press conference." The coldness of the words was unbearable. Young men like Jamal treated as batches, deaths planned as public image tools, and the worst, an attached video. It showed a meeting between Ellison, Whitaker, and Mason in a private parking lot. They toasted with plastic cups. The audio, captured by a poorly deactivated security camera microphone, recorded the most brutal phrase of the night. "These kids are like cockroaches. The more you kill, the more the city thanks you." Malik didn't hesitate. He gathered all the files into a new package: images, videos, audios, contracts, conversations, and above all, that disgusting toast between the three. He named the file the EmpireFalls.zip. At 6:03 a.m. that Friday, the package was simultaneously published on 27 platforms, including international servers, encrypted forums, and journalistic websites outside the United States. This time, there was no stopping it. There was no denying it. The empire bled before the world. Mason tried to deny it, but was disproven by his own digital signature. Whitaker, a fugitive, was added to the FBI's most wanted list. Charles Ellison appeared on TV with sunken eyes and a wavering tone. He spoke like someone who knew he had lost. The empire of charisma collapsed. His company's shares plummeted. Contracts were frozen. Federal investigations were opened. And while all this was happening, Malik watched from an abandoned slab, the place where it all began. Alyssa found him there, enveloped in silence and admiration. She knew what that meant, but she also knew what would come next. Dawn arrived unhurriedly. Chicago seemed to hold its breath. The alleys slept in silence. The buildings trembled discreetly with the cold, and the only living sounds came from the rhythmic beat of federal agents' boots approaching. There were no sirens, no helicopters, just the certainty that the system, wounded, was now coming to collect its price. Malik didn't run. Sitting on top of the slab where he had so often hidden from the city, he watched the distant lights as if watching the end of a play. In his hands, he held the same laptop he had used to fix, to hack, to destroy. But now he had left it open, the files published, the path complete. Alyssa hugged him before going down. She knew there was nothing more to be said. He looked at her serenely, asked her to take care of what would come next. He said he didn't regret it, that Jamal deserved it, that everyone deserved it. When the agents arrived, Malik was standing, his arms raised, his eyes firm. They didn't try to humiliate him. They just handcuffed him in silence. One of the men, younger, hesitated when he looked at him. Perhaps he recognized the symbol. Perhaps he had read the leaks. Official cameras announced the arrest as a successful operation against cyber terrorism.
But on social media, what circulated was another image. That of Malik, handcuffed, head held high, being led away while young people shouted his name from nearby buildings. Ghost! 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 In federal prison, he was placed in isolation. Officials tried to keep him invisible, but there was no hiding him. International newspapers began to publish editorials with his face in black and white. Documentarians sought contact with Alyssa. A petition for his release surpassed 500,000 signatures in 2 days. Charles Ellison's empire was in ruins. Mason resigned. The company was divided. New investigations emerged every week. Several state prosecutors resigned, and in previously untouchable secretariats, disappeared files began to reappear. Inside the cell, Malik read letters. Hundreds. Letters from young people across the United States, from mothers who lost children, from teachers who used his story as an example, from hackers who had been inspired. In some of them came drawings, others with short phrases. You made me believe someone like me can win. You were the first to fight for us. You are not alone. And in one of them, a simple, handwritten line. Jamal would be proud. Time passed. Headlines changed. But in every alley where the system once reigned in silence, something had been born. A name, a symbol, a seed that refused to die. A year passed, the city changed, but not as much as it promised. The dilapidated buildings remained standing, schools still struggled for funding, and the sirens, oh the sirens, continued to cut through the sky with the same frequency as before. But something had changed. In the prosecutor's corridors, names once untouchable now caused unease. Some were being judged, others had disappeared from the map. Charles Ellison, once a face plastered on billboards, was now seen in inquiry files, answering for corruption, money laundering, and association with paramilitary groups. He had fallen. Not with an explosion, but with the dry sound of truth finally being told in loud and clear code. Malik remained imprisoned, but he wasn't a number, nor a ghost. He was a symbol. Alyssa founded an NGO. It's called Legacy. It works in marginalized communities, teaching young people to code, to protect themselves, to understand the system, not as victims, but as future engineers of change. In every workshop, there's an empty chair with a black laptop and a name printed on white tape. Malik Carter. On the main wall of the headquarters, a mural shows Malik in urban strokes, his face half covered by binary codes, surrounded by smiling children and data flowing like rivers. And in any public school, in any neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, a 12-year-old boy, black, thin, silent as Malik was, presses a key with uncertain fingers. On the screen, a terminal window opens. He smiles. Someone asks what he's doing. The boy replies, he's learning to hack, but only what's necessary to change the world.